For 9 agonizing months, Preston lived under a cloud of suspicion. After his girlfriend, Corinne, vanished from a spring break party in Gulf Shores, Alabama, police had zeroed in on him, the recent ex-boyfriend. His life had crumbled, but his belief in Corinne's vibrant spirit never did. That hope ignites into a raging fire the day a boat breaker, dismantling a derelict shrimp boat, finds a distinctive, hand-crocheted sunflower bikini top tangled deep within the vessel's corroded engine block. It's a story about how one small, forgotten object can change everything. If you find yourself captivated by mysteries like this one, consider sticking around to hear how it all unfolds. The 9 months after Corinne disappeared had been a slow, grinding erosion of Preston's life. The official term for his status was a person of interest, but in a town like Gulf Shores, that was just a polite way of saying, the guy who probably did it. He'd lost his job bartending at a beachside grill. The owner said it was bad for business having him there. Friends who had once clapped him on the back and shared beers now crossed the street to avoid making eye contact. His world had shrunk to the 4 walls of his small apartment and the worried faces of his parents. The police had been relentless at first. Their breakup, just 2 weeks before the party, was the hook they hung their entire theory on. It hadn't been a bad breakup. It was the kind of mutual, sad decision college kids make when they realize they're growing in different directions. "Let's just take a break this summer," Corinne had said, her eyes full of a gentle sorrow that matched his own. See what happens. To the detectives, that gentle sorrow was a lie. It had to be a screaming match, a jealous rage. They painted him as the scorned lover who couldn't handle rejection. He'd told them over and over that he'd left the party early, that he'd gone home alone with a headache from the loud music. He had no alibi beyond his own word, and his word wasn't worth much anymore. Then came the phone call. It was a Tuesday morning, and Preston was staring into a cup of coffee, trying to summon the energy to look for jobs in another city, another state, anywhere but here. The caller ID was the Gulf Shores Police Department. His stomach twisted into a familiar knot. "Mr. Vance, this is Detective Morris." The voice was flat, devoid of the accusatory tone Preston was used to. "We need you to come down to the Bayou La Batre Marina. A salvage crew found something we think you should see." The drive felt like a dream. He didn't ask what they'd found. He was afraid the word would be body. When he arrived, the scene was cordoned off with yellow tape. A rusted-out shrimp boat, the Sea Serpent, was pulled halfway out of the water onto a dry dock, its hull blistered and peeling. A group of burly men in greasy overalls stood watching as Detective Morris met him by the tape. Morris led him toward a piece of machinery on the dock. The boat's engine, a massive corroded block of iron, sat exposed to the sun, and there, caught on a greasy bolt deep within the mess of pistons and wires, was a splash of color. It was a hand-crocheted sunflower. Preston's breath caught in his throat. Corinne's younger sister, Maya, was talented with a crochet hook. For Corinne's 21st birthday, she'd spent a month making that bikini top. Each petal of the 2 sunflowers was perfect. It was Corinne's favorite thing to wear. Seeing it now, stained with rust and grime, ripped in one spot, was like a physical blow. "It's hers," Preston whispered, his voice cracking. The salvage foreman said it was wedged in there tight. "Took a crowbar to get the panel off," Morris said, watching Preston's face carefully. "Looks like it's been there a while." To the detective, this might have been just another piece of a puzzle that pointed to a tragic drowning. Maybe Corinne had stumbled onto the boat, fallen, and been swept away by the tide. But to Preston, it was a declaration of war. Corinne would never have gone onto a disgusting, derelict boat like that on her own. She was terrified of tetanus and spiders. Someone had taken her there. The bikini top wasn't just a clue, it was a compass point. It proved she was on this specific boat. And now, for the first time in 9 months, Preston had a mission. He had to find out who had access to the sea serpent on the night she disappeared. He drove home from the marina with a clarity he hadn't felt since the moment he realized Corinne was missing. The police had their piece of evidence, but he knew they would move slowly, drowning in procedure. They still saw him as the jealous ex. If he wanted real answers, he'd have to find them himself. His apartment, which had felt like a prison for months, now became his headquarters. He booted up his old laptop, the screen flickering to life. His first step was to revisit the night of the party. He went straight to social media, to the event page for Jenna's spring break blowout. Hundreds of photos and videos were still there, a digital ghost of the last night he saw Corinne alive. He had looked through them before, in the early days, with a desperate, unfocused grief. He'd been searching for her face, for a sign of where she might have gone. Now, his search was different. He ignored the smiling faces and the red plastic cups. He was looking at the backgrounds. He needed to connect someone from that party to that boat. He meticulously scanned every image, his eyes tracing the line of the shore, the docks that jutted out into the bay behind the party house. In a blurry video, someone had taken of a beer pong game. He saw it. For just a few seconds, past the edge of the porch, the distinctive high bow of the sea serpent was visible, moored at the end of a private dock. He spent the next 2 days messaging people who had been at the party. The responses were few and far between. Most left him on read. The whispers of the town had reached far. Why would they talk to the guy who was the main suspect? A few replied with short, unhelpful answers. Sorry, I don't remember anything. I was pretty drunk that night. Leave me alone. He was about to give up for the day when a new message popped up. It was from a girl named Becca. She had been a friend of Corinne's from a literature class. Preston remembered her as quiet and kind. Hey, her message read. I heard they found something. I'm so sorry, Preston. I never believed it was you. If you want to talk, let me know. There was something weird that night. Preston's heart hammered against his ribs. He called her immediately. Becca's voice was hesitant at first, filled with guilt. I should have said something to the police, but it seemed so small, and they were so focused on you, she explained. It's just, Corinne was talking to this guy for a long time. I'd never seen him before. What did he look like? Preston asked, grabbing a pen and a notepad. Older, Becca said. Maybe late 20s. He wasn't dressed like a student. He had this really nice camera, a professional one. He told her he was a freelance photographer, that she had a really unique look. Corinne was flattered, you know how she was. Always saw the good in people. Preston's mind raced. He asked Becca to go through the party photos with him over a video call. Together, they scrolled through the sea of faces. There, Becca said suddenly, her voice sharp. In the background of that picture of Katie doing a keg stand. That's him. Preston zoomed in. The man was just as Becca had described. Charismatic, with an easy smile, leaning against the porch railing, his camera hanging from his neck. and he was looking directly at Corinne. Chills ran down Preston's spine. In another photo, they were closer, talking near the edge of the property that led down to the docks. "Did you see where they went?" Preston asked. "No," Becca said, her voice small. "That's the last time I saw her. I thought maybe she just went for a walk with him on the beach." The photo had been tagged with the names of the people in the foreground, but the photographer in the background was an unknown. Preston spent the next hour trying every possible search. He used facial recognition software he found online, with no luck. He was about to give up when he noticed a small detail in the photo. On the man's wrist was a leather cuff with a strange silver emblem. It was a long shot, but he screenshotted it, cropped it, and ran an image search for the emblem. The results were mostly jewelry sites, but one link stood out. It was a blog post from a local arts festival a year prior. The post featured photos of artists, and there he was, the same man, the same leather cuff. The caption read, "Photographer Julian Croft discusses his series on coastal life." Preston's fingers flew across the keyboard. He found Julian Croft's professional website and social media profiles within minutes. The profiles were a curated collection of beautiful, artistic shots of young women on beaches, in fields, in rustic, abandoned-looking buildings. It was all very professional, very polished. Then Preston saw the photo that made his blood run cold. It was from 2 years ago. Julian Croft, smiling, leaning against the side of a shrimp boat. The name on the hull was faded but legible. Sea Serpent. The official story, the one the police had clung to, was that Corinne had wandered off alone, drunk and heartbroken, and had fallen into the water. It was a tragedy, but it was simple. This photo proved it was all a lie. The man who had been charming Corinne, the man who had a connection to the very boat where her bikini top was found, was not a random stranger. He was the key. Preston saved the photo, his hands shaking. He now had a name, a face, and a direct link to the crime scene. He knew the police would have to listen to him now. The cloud of suspicion he had lived under was finally starting to part, replaced by the cold, hard certainty of the hunt. He sent everything he had found, the photos, the social media links, the name Julian Croft, in a detailed email to Detective Morris. He expected a call back within the hour, but the hours ticked by, turning into a full day, and his phone remained silent. Frustrated and impatient, he called the station. He was put on hold for 10 minutes before Morris finally came on the line. "We got your email, Mr. Vance," the detective said, his voice weary. "We're looking into it." "Looking into it?" Preston's voice rose. "The man was with her right before she disappeared, and he has a picture with the boat where you found her clothes. What more do you need?" "It's a 2-year-old photo," Morris countered. "He told us he sold his share in that boat over a year ago. Says he barely knew the girl, just talked to her for a few minutes about taking some pictures. His story checks out so far. We can't just haul a guy in because he was at a party." Preston felt the familiar cold dread creeping back in. They still didn't believe him. To them, Julian Croft was a plausible distraction, but he, Preston, was still the heartbroken ex-boyfriend. He knew then that if he wanted justice, the police would not be the ones to deliver it. He would have to keep digging himself. He focused his search on Julian Croft. The man's online presence was carefully managed, a professional website, an Instagram account filled with his work, a LinkedIn profile listing his freelance clients. But Preston was looking for the cracks. He started digging into public records, property databases, anything he could find. He discovered that for the past 3 years, Croft had been leasing a commercial space in an old, semi-abandoned warehouse district down by the industrial marina, not far from where the Sea Serpent had been moored before it was towed to the scrapyard. The address was listed under his business name, Croft Coastal Imagery. The next day, Preston drove out to the warehouse. It was a desolate place, a collection of cavernous brick buildings with shattered windows and graffiti-scarred walls. A high chain-link fence surrounded the complex, but a section of it was bent back, leaving a gap big enough for a person to squeeze through. Preston parked his car down the street and watched for an hour. There was no sign of life. He knew it was a stupid, reckless idea. But the thought of Corinne and the image of her sunflower bikini top tangled in that engine pushed him forward. He squeezed through the fence and made his way to the unit listed on the lease. A heavy padlock secured the roll-up door, but a smaller side door looked less secure. He pulled at the handle, and to his surprise, the rusted lock gave way with a groan. He slipped inside, pulling the door shut behind him. The air was thick with the smell of dust and photographic chemicals. It was a large, open space, clearly a makeshift studio. Backdrops were rolled up against one wall, and lighting equipment stood like skeletal figures in the gloom. A small area was partitioned off as a living space, with a mattress on the floor and a hot plate on a crate. It was messy, but one thing stood out to Preston. It was a space designed for one person, with no sign that anyone else ever stayed there. He moved cautiously toward the back of the studio, where a door was covered by a heavy black curtain. He pulled it aside, revealing a dark room. The chemical smell was stronger here. Trays and tongs were scattered on a workbench, and photos hung from a line, held by clothespins. Most were the same artistic shots from Julian's website. But as Preston looked closer, he saw a small wooden box tucked under the workbench, almost completely hidden in the shadows. He pulled it out. It was a simple, unvarnished box with a small brass latch. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, were small personal items: a silver locket, a single pearl earring, a keychain with a fluffy cat, and a University of Alabama student ID card. The face smiling out from the plastic was Corinne's. Underneath it were other IDs, belonging to 3 other young women he didn't recognize. Preston stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat. This wasn't just a clue. This was a monster's trophy box. He pulled out his phone, his fingers fumbling with the screen as he dialed 911. "I'm at 1450 Industrial Way," he said, his voice a raw whisper. "I've found evidence in the disappearance of Corinne Becker, the man who did it. His name is Julian Croft." As he was on the phone with the dispatcher, he heard the sound of a vehicle pulling up outside, the crunch of tires on gravel. Headlights flashed through the grimy warehouse windows. Julian Croft was back. Preston's heart leaped into his throat. "He's here," he hissed into the phone. "He just got here." He ended the call and looked around wildly for a place to hide. The only option was the dark room. He ducked inside, pulling the heavy curtain shut, and wedged a metal stool under the doorknob. He could hear Julian entering the main studio, whistling a tune. Preston held his breath, praying the police would get there in time. The footsteps grew closer. They stopped right outside the darkroom door. The doorknob rattled. When the justice system seems to be failing, is it ever truly right to take the investigation into your own hands, even if it means breaking the law and putting yourself in danger. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If this story gave you chills, consider liking and subscribing for more tales of mysteries that were never meant to be solved. Thank you for listening.